people. South Central Texas. Welcome, welcome. Amanda, hey Karen. Hey Vanessa, hey Carla. Greetings all. Fantastic. Okay, Lori, next slide, please. That's okay if you don't have a camera. You don't need it this time. So, guys, as you can tell, you're already in the chat, which is fantastic. This is how we're going to engage during today's webinar. When you're ready to speak, raise your hand and we're going to ask you to unmute yourselves. If you'd like to be on camera, that's fine. Once you raise your hand and we unmute you, you're gonna pop up on the camera. Okay. Feel free to type your comments in the group chat. Make sure it's going to everyone. Otherwise, it's going to end up in just the panelists. And then please be patient with us. We had 230 people register for today's event. Can you imagine if they all show up? Mind blown. Be patient with us as we try to get all this great information. Also, we're going to go a little bit over today because we're going to build in some time for Q&A, okay, for a deep dive. Because last time you guys, Maria-Elena couldn't get off like we were here because people had so many questions, which we love. So just a heads up, we've increased our time a little bit. Okay, next. These are our agreements. If you've been here with us at any time, any of our webinars, you know that we have these fantastic agreements. And it's the way that we try to keep a safe space. So as you're sharing today, I'm going to ask you to speak for your own experience, use I statements because your experience has value without being able to draw from someone else. You have your own unique experiences that we'd love for you to share about during today's webinar when you have the opportunity. And then follow the golden rule, treat other people the way you want to be treated. So no judging, no nasty stuff. Let's be kind to one another in the chat, and encouraging. And then please no multitasking. Well, we do know that you're online and this is lunchtime. So eat away. Be a part of the conversation though. So try not to be doing all answering all your emails and stuff, okay? Because then you're gonna miss something. And Maria-Elena's got another fantastic presentation for us. We don't want you to miss it. If you need a minute, take a minute. We will be here until at least 1:30 today, Central Time. 12:01, right? Okay. Yep. If you agree, go ahead and drop it in the chat. I see some of you guys already are picking up what I'm putting down. I love it. Making this space safe. Woo, woo. Love it. Thanks, guys. All right, next slide. So, navigating immigration resources, part two. We are so honored to have Maria-Elena Allegra. Agrela. Did I say it wrong? Did I say Agrela?
There you go.
Yay, Agrela with us today. And she was here in June and did a fantastic presentation for us about navigating immigration resources. It was one of our um, most populated webinars because we know that this is the time that we're in, this time of uncertainty and craziness, that this was a useful webinar. She did it for her network. And I was like, we got to bring her over to Be Strong Families. We did. She was a hit. We love her. We're so honored that she would come back and do this deep dive for us. So Maria is a proud first generation Mexican Portuguese American. She holds 2 masters, so she's super smart, guys, in school counseling and the second in principal leadership, school administration, including director of special education endorsement. And then there's just little old me, your host for today's webinar conversation. I love being with you guys. I'm happy to be here with Maria-Elena, and I'm going to turn it over to her, and I will see you guys just before we close out. All right, Maria.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I'm gonna share my screen. Please don't judge like all the crap that I have on my computer. That is just how I work. But I'm gonna share my screen. We're actually gonna start here so I could show you how to get all the information that I'm sharing today. So this is our navigating immigration resources. I know we have people from all over the United States and maybe even around the world. A lot of this is pretty specific to like the Chicagoland, Illinois area, but there are some resources for nationally, right? So I just want to kind of make sure that everybody knows that. But there's a lot of resources that are for everyone. There's a table of contents here. So you could go straight to like know your rights, making a plan. We're going to go through all of this in our presentation today. Also, if you want a copy of the presentation, it is here. You click here, it'll take you to the presentation. Nothing that I have is like secret or, I'm sharing everything, all of my resources because my resources are, I think it's too important to like gatekeep. So I just want to make sure that everyone has access. I put the link in the chat. Um, so please, please, please help yourself. I'll share the link again at the end of our session. Um, so let me go to our presentation. So I'm gonna put that away and we're gonna go, hopefully, yes. And just a little note, I am having the translations in Spanish of what I say. Unfortunately, my presentation is all in English. Um, but I thought at least we could do translations in Spanish. And just give me 1 second. I am going to cover the translations in Spanish because I get extremely distracted by them. So I'm just putting post-its to cover them on my end. But if anybody is needing translations, they are there in Spanish. Okay, so we're gonna be talking about navigating immigration resources. If you were here for our first one, the first session really dove into an overview of the immigration. We really dove deep into the know your rights, and then we didn't have time for making a plan and talking points. So we're gonna kind of skip the overview just because of time. And again, we've already done that first part. We're gonna do a little refresher on the know your rights. And if you want a deep dive presentation, I will tell you how to access that. Um, the Resurrection Project here in Illinois, out of Chicago, has an online Facebook presentation every week. On Tuesdays, I believe they're in English, and on Thursdays, I believe they're in Spanish, but you could check them out on Facebook. Um, and they will do a deep dive into the Know Your Rights. In case you haven't been to one, in case you missed it. That's my recommendation, my resource for Know Your Rights, and it's online, so anybody could go to it, anybody could access it. So make sure you check them out. We'll also go into the making a plan, including short-term guardianship, and then we're going to be talking about that mental health piece and talking points. Okay. We've already gone over group norms. We don't need to do that again. Sarita shared a little bit about me, but there's my dog Joey, who's here in the office with me is for moral support. Um, oh, the website for the deep dive. Oh, the website for the Know Your Rights is the Facebook page for the Resurrection Project. So they're out of Chicago and they're called the Resurrection Project. Fantastic organization that is doing groundbreaking work on immigration here in the Chicagoland area. All right. We're going to skip that, but I would like to gauge how much you know about immigration issues. So one being like, what is immigration? What does that mean? To like five, you're an expert and you should be doing this presentation instead of me. So if you could just throw it in the chat, where's your gauge? Who am I talking to? What kind of experts do we have in the room? Because if there's any fives, I might count on you for some backup and support. Okay. Thanks everyone for answering. Yeah. Okay. Thanks everyone. Okay. So, um, you know, uh, there's so much going on, and I kind of want to start with this just because, and the Resurrection Project is on here, right? And here in Illinois, these are who I'm following. These are the people that I'm getting trusted information from, up to date, things like that. The Resurrection Project is huge. ICER of Illinois is also huge. Latino Policy Forum, our representative, Congressman Chuy Garcia, a lawyer friend of mine, she's Abogada Rocio, she's amazing. So, if you're not from this area, please do some research and see who's providing those like up to date information for you. Um, Also, the Resurrection Project also does a once a week like talk about like what's happening like this week, right? So another good resource to keep up to date on what's happening. I hope that in your area you have something like that if you're not from around here. But definitely check on like who are your trusted resources because that's really, really important. Okay, so we're gonna do a little overview on Know Your Rights, right? We will skip that. And I think it's really important to note that regardless of your immigration status, you have protections under the Constitution, right? And I think sometimes our own government is forgetting that and that people have the right to due process. So it's just really something to keep at the forefront of your thinking. Um, why can't I go to the next screen? There we go. Okay, so overall, you have the right to remain silent, and it's really important that we tell our families that they need to say that. So they need to say, I wish to remain silent. Once they say that, they don't have to say anything. You also have the right to not open your door unless ICE or the police have a signed judicial warrant. I will show you what that looks like. You also have the right to not sign anything. I know that one thing that ICE is trying to get people to do is to sign a paper that is expediting their deportation. So they're waiving their rights to see a judge and expediting their deportation. So we're telling our families not to sign anything and to make sure that they're speaking with a lawyer, and they have the right to be represented by an attorney. Um, and it's just something to note that immigration attorneys are not like, it's not like the criminal justice system where if you don't have an attorney, one will be provided for you. Immigration isn't criminal court. So an attorney is not provided for individuals who are being detained and need an attorney. That is provided at their own expense or their family's expense, right? You also have the right to request a telephone call, and it's going to be a local call, so depending on where you are, right? So it's really important that we're telling our families to make sure that they're memorizing someone's phone number, right? A family, a friend with legal status. All right. Any questions on that? I guess we'll kind of, you know, check in as we go. I am going to provide the next slide is talking about what what a warrant is. So on your screen right now is an example of an administrative warrant. This is not a judicial warrant. There is no space, there's no signature of a judge, right? And it's like the little red line at the bottom says it must be signed by an immigration officer to be valid. Yeah, there's no judge there, right? Um, ICE cannot enter your house with this. And again, a lot of families are being tricked into thinking that this is a warrant, right? It's an administrative warrant. It's not a judicial warrant. Here is what a judicial warrant looks like. So it says United States District Court at the top. There is space for a judge's signature. Um, and it's really important to note that these judicial warrants must have everything correct in order to be valid. So it should have your correct name, it should have your correct address, a valid date. And right now they're saying like 6 months, a date of within 6 months is current. And it has to have a judge's signature. If all of those things are incorrect, then the warrant is invalid. So like for instance, my name is Maria-Elena Agrela, right? If it were to say Maria Agrela, it would not be valid. That's not my name. That's my grandma's name. She's deceased now. But my legal name is Maria-Elena Agrela. So it needs to have your entire, your correct name, even on the address. If you live in apartment 1C and the warrant only says 1, it's not valid because what if there's a 1A and a 1B and then a 1C? If it just says 1 and it's that's not where you live, then it's an invalid warrant, right? They need to the ICE agents need to go and get it corrected. Okay. And again, here's making sure that it's signed by a judge, just all everything that we just talked about. Again, you're not obligated to open the door. Okay. Uh, I skipped a lot because of time, but I also wanted to just kind of do a review too, knowing your rights at public spaces. So, unfortunately, ICE does not need a warrant to search public spaces. A lot of places that are private, they don't have the right to go into. So around here, a lot of our restaurants have been locking their doors, making their space private, right? That when you want to enter, you have to knock and be let in. Um, so ICE does not, but however, if a place is open to the public, then that is space where ICE is allowed to go to, right? If ICE stops you on the street, you are not required to show identification or answer questions. You simply could ask, "Am I free to go?" and walk away calmly. If ICE says no, again, then you kick into your other rights, right? You have the right to remain silent. You don't sign anything, etc., right? Um, if you are detained by ICE, uh, it's important. You don't have to say anything at all, period. End of story. However, we are recommending that families at least give a name and date of birth. And that's because if you have loved ones looking for you, they'll have a, yes, we'll send everything out after the meeting. Absolutely. I will share the link when we're all done, Miss Lisa. But yeah, if it's really important that your families try to find you. So if you don't give a name, they'll put you in as like John Doe or something, right? Like that, right? Like a generic name, and your families won't be able to find you. And so at the very minimum, if you are detained by ICE, we do recommend that you give a name and a date of birth. It's also really important that individuals memorize their A number, their alien registration number, because you will need to know that. And also ask to speak to an attorney. All detention centers should allow you to make a phone call. There will probably be a charge. And only inform your lawyer about your immigration status. And once again, always ask to see a judge and do not sign anything. Do not let them trick you into signing anything. Okay. Okay, so if a family member is detained by ICE, right? Here in Illinois, we are having our families call ICER to report this and to get services and resources because they do have all of that. But to find someone, you would use this website, the locator.ice.gov. It does take a few days for everything for them to get processed. I've heard as much as 5 days to 7. And then I've also heard worse stories. But I have not heard of anybody being like located immediately. So give it a couple of days, which is scary, right? Because you don't know if your family member really got picked up and there's been people who've been reported missing, but they ended up being detained by ICE. It's important if you have a consulate here to call them. They have a lot of resources as well. Here in Chicago, we have our Mexican consulate has a very a very important presence here in the Chicagoland area. And it's also important to know that if that person gets bonded out, like where they're allowed to go home on bond, 100% of that has to be paid in cash. Um, and the bonds here in Illinois have averaged between $8,000 and $12,000. Do all of these rights and rules apply for extensions of ICE? Yeah, okay, so I guess I kind of skipped that. I didn't include that slide, but yes. So a lot of other federal agencies have been deputized to work as ICE agents. So that does so if they're detained under that ICE umbrella, that all those rules do apply. I'll say this. We know that a lot of rules aren't being followed, right? That they're picking up individuals without a warrant, and they're some even are, either citizens or have their papers in order, right? So they are documented and they're like awaiting and doing the process to get their citizenship. Um, they're going through all of those motions. Um, so it's your right, right? Like um they're breaking what the process has been. But yeah, and the bounty hunters, if they're not deputized, like if they're not federal agents and they're like these like rogue bounty hunters, I feel like that's so illegal. I don't know what the solution is to that, right? Like call ACLU, make, I feel like there's going to be so much that comes out of everything that's happening. Because we know that there's been people who've been like dressed as ICE, trying to like kidnap individuals and and cause harm. So, but I do know that like DEA agents and AFT agents and things like that have been deputized to work as ICE agents. The ACLU is a organization that fights for individuals, like for rights and making sure that the Constitution is being upheld. I don't know what all the acronyms stand for. I know Dana's been sending stuff, so if you could find the ACLU website and post that, that would be American Civil Liberties Union. Thank you, because my brain is not working, and there's so many acronyms out there. Let me read this question really quick. Are you hearing of ICE agents attempting to enter public schools? We have internal policies in place. So, um, yes. So there was an incident here in Illinois where a student in at in Elgin Community College was picked up. I don't know if they were picked up like inside a building. I don't have those details, but they were picked up on campus. Um, so I know that schools around here and on my immigration resource guide, there is a section for schools and what schools should be doing um, to protect students inside. And I do have a slide that talks about like how we're protecting students, right? I won't be emailing the guide, but I will put the guide's link in the chat, which maybe it's still, hold on, hold on. It's still saved on my copy and paste. So there's my resource guide. Um, the link to this presentation is on there and all of the resources that I have are on there. Okay. Yeah. Let's go back to the presentation. These are great questions though. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I want to make sure that we're addressing questions as we go. So I'm fine being a little scatterbrained. But okay, so back to the presentation. So if a family member is detained by ICE, make sure you're calling an attorney or legal representative. As I said before, um, that is out of pocket. Again, immigration is not criminal court. A lawyer is not provided for you. All right, next screen. So many screens up. Okay, and then FYI, if you're from Illinois, there are no immigration detention centers in Illinois. Individuals can be arrested and detained by ICE. The closest ones around here are Wisconsin, Indiana, and Kentucky. I will also put a disclaimer, and it's been all over the news that there is a processing center here in Broadview, which is down the street from where I work. Um, it's not supposed to be used as a detention center. It's supposed to be used as a processing center, and that center has been here for years, like longer than I could remember. And so, and there has been protests out there daily, and it's gotten very heated. Again, I think it's been all over the news, even if you're not from the Chicagoland area. But technically, there are no detention centers in Illinois. So the closest ones are Wisconsin, Indiana, Kentucky. Individuals who've been picked up here by ICE, I know have gone as far as like Las Vegas. They've been sent to Louisiana. I think even Florida. So, because once these detention centers are filled, they have to be sent somewhere else. So, um, if a family member has been detained here in Illinois, we are strongly encouraging you to call the ICE or Family Support Hotline, which is the 855 number on the screen. Um, and also here in Illinois, if you are reaching out to an attorney, I think it's really important to double check that that person is a licensed attorney here. And there's a website that you could put their name in there to see if they're licensed to work. It's also really important to note that notaries are not attorneys. I know in Mexico, notarios are attorneys. It's another word for attorney, right? And they're able to be given legal advice. But here in Illinois, notary or here in the United States, notaries are not attorneys. They're only people who could witness a signature, right? They should not and cannot be giving out legal advice. And I know that I've seen a lot of scams right now, and I have another page on scams. Um, but there are a lot of scams right now where notaries are trying to take advantage of the situation and charging people to fill out like the short-term guardianship form, which they're advertising the incorrect form, and they're also charging for it. So notaries are not attorneys. They cannot give legal advice. Um, and I believe that you could report them to like the Attorney General's office and that they could launch an investigation. Um, just going back, if you are stopped or detained while driving, a passenger is not required to have a license or ID in the vehicle. Drivers should not be driving without a driver's license. We want to make sure that that people aren't putting themselves in even bigger situations where they could get even more in trouble, right? So people should not be driving without a driver's license if they could help it. And also, undocumented immigrants here in Illinois uh, may be eligible for a regular driver's license that look like a regular driver's license. So the um, the previous license that they had looked different, and now you could get one that looks just like everybody else's. It doesn't indicate anything. Um, Unfortunately, if you are not from Illinois, this question may not pertain to you. So you do not have to, if you're in Illinois, you do not have to answer questions about where you were born and how long you've been in the United States. If you live in other parts of the country, that might be the case where they're allowed to do that. So in Texas, they're allowed to do that, right? In California, they're allowed to do that, um, especially if you're closer to the border. But here in Illinois, um, they're not allowed to ask you questions about your status. And then again, for here in Illinois, if there are any violations, you could report that to the OCAD. If a parent has a state template. We're going to talk about the power of attorney and short-term guardianship in a little bit. So we're going to put that question on hold, okay? We will circle back to it. Okay. So actions to take during law enforcement encounters, right? So make sure that you want to verify, document, and report. Like those are the three things that we want to make sure people are doing. Um, and it's been all over the news, right? Like a lot of these agents are hiding their face. They're not showing who they are. They're not having proper identification. This is technically our rights to know, right? It's a safety issue. If some random person who's not identifying themselves is trying to detain it's scary. You have no idea what's actually happening. And this is why there's been people who've been able to like fake being ICE because they're following what they're doing, right? So it's just important if you can verify, document, and report. And then filming. So here in Illinois, you have the right to record a public interaction with police and ICE. So we want to make sure that if you are doing so, you want to assess the risk and follow these tips. So do not obstruct the police or ICE. Film from a safe distance, narrate the recording with specific dates, times, locations, descriptions of what's happening, obey the commands from police or ICE and move back if given and give them space. If police or ICE order you to stop filming and it makes sense to do so for your safety, you should. Um, I would also recommend if in your area where you live, if there are a lot of rapid response groups forming to help get the word out where there's ICE and to also support individuals who are possibly being detained. So if you see like a rapid response training in your area, I would recommend you go to one and so you learn. It doesn't necessarily there's no commitment to like that if you go, then you have to go to where an ICE agent is. But I've gone just to learn the knowledge of like what is being taught to people, what our people should and shouldn't be doing. And again, it's about safety, right? So making sure, and you should be doing what you feel comfortable doing. Like if you don't feel comfortable filming, then don't film. Like don't put yourself at risk if you don't feel that way. The one that I went to was out of Paso. They're out of Paso is located in Melrose Park, Illinois. But there are some online. Um, I know that I'm going to, give me a second, I'm going to look on my phone. I'm going to one online, I think next week. Let me see, give me one second. And I might have the information there. So there's a Know Your Rights training for protests that might involve interactions with authorities. Um, I will have to find where that was like, what organization that was through, but that was online, so anybody could attend that. Um, yeah. And my contact information will be given at the end, so if there's anything you want me to like go back and check for you and share with you, feel free to reach out, right? On the resource guide, all of this stuff is available, all of these flyers. So these are the flyers that I prefer to share out personally. So like when I'm out in the community and I'm giving information out, this is what I'm sharing. I like this guide, and this one's in English and Spanish, right? Just for the presentations, all in English, but I have Spanish versions. But it shows you the warrants, right? And that's really important that people understand what the warrant's supposed to look like. Again, some of the times it's a little of a mute point because they're picking up people without a warrant. There's also Know Your Right cards available that you could give out. Um, I carry the red ones, these red cards. And there are organizations that have these in like multiple languages. So if you are working with a group of people that Spanish isn't their language and you need it like in Polish or Chinese, there are other languages that is available. Again, this is more for Illinois. I'll kind of skip that, but this is for everybody. So, if you have someone who's kind of unsure of what their status is, like maybe they've applied and they don't know where they are, you could always either call or go to the USCIS Gov website to check on your immigration status. Okay. And then we've talked a little bit about fraud, but it's really important that if you are seeking help, that you're going to someone who's reputable, right? I would recommend that you go to um like an org that's a trusted org, maybe a welcoming center. Um, don't go to Joe Schmo because you saw them online, right? Go to a reputable community resource. Make sure you're checking credentials, get everything in writing. Please note that notaries cannot give legal advice, right? They could only verify someone's identity and their signature. There's also a lot of scams where immigration is like quote unquote reaching out. So they're not going to call you randomly. They're not going to send you an unsolicited text and they're not going to use WhatsApp. I will say that the consulate uses WhatsApp, but they're not going to initiate conversation with you, right? So if you reach out to the Mexican consulate through WhatsApp, they will report back, but they're not going to send you just a random message, right? And just beware of false promises because no one could guarantee an outcome. So if a lawyer is saying, "Hey, if you give me $10,000, I could have you have your citizenship by next year," that's untrue, right? And if something happened with one family, don't expect it to be like everyone's situation is different. So it's really important to note that too. So if one family went through one thing, don't assume that that's how your outcome and your story is going to go. So just kind of keep that in mind. So everyone's stories are really individualized, and lawyers cannot promise out a guarantee. Um, and then again, here in Illinois, if there's any fraud or anything you want to report, you could report it to the Attorney General's office. And then just quick review, do learn your rights. Uh, we encourage everyone to not carry any fraudulent documents on them. Carry copies of any approval documents regarding your immigration status. Keep them on your phone. Keep a copy. Keep the real copy at home. So you want to have like multiple copies of it, right? We're really trying to decrease the panic. I know around here, with ICE being so prevalent in the area in the past few weeks, it's been hard to like not panic, but we're really trying to make sure that families aren't panicking. We're encouraging our families to create a plan. So we're going to go over the plan next. Don't isolate yourself. So really important to find community and support, and don't sign anything, and don't run, and don't lie. Okay. Okay. And then just a quick review over student protection. So these are the few things that are protecting students. So we have FERPA, which is the federal law that protects students' education records and family information from being shared, right? So FERPA supersedes state law and is applicable to schools and post-secondary institutions. So schools cannot share students' personal records and information. Okay. And then McKinney-Vento is the law that also offers protections for students who are in temporary living situations. So our homeless students, right? Or those students who don't have a fixed home. And then there's Plyer versus Doe, which affirms that all children, regardless of their immigration status, have a constitutional right to a free public education. Um, but each school, and I will say, like, because going back to the question where, like, is ICE allowed in your school? No. I mean, yes, they could enter your school according to the law. However, your school's policies in place, your school should have like a protocol of what to do if any like officer walks into the building, right? Regardless of their ICE or police or anything, right? And there should be a process in place of how you're protecting your students. Um, and also kind of going back to like that public space. So if there's a buzzing system for your building, it's not a public space, right? So they have to have permission. They should have a warrant. And your individual school should have a protocol of what to do if any agency comes to a school looking for a student, right? So that's kind of a school by school situation. And there's no like governing rules or laws that like dictate schools how they're supposed to do it. So you have to look to your individual school for that guidance and support. More on Plier versus Doe. Again, you have access to this later, so you could go over it. Um, okay, so we're gonna jump into making a plan. Just gonna kind of gauge everyone ready. Like I just want to gauge that we're good. I've thrown out a lot of information at you. Um, just take a deep breath. I'm gonna take a sip of water before we jump into making a plan. Okay. So why a plan, right? Amid uncertainty, we need to like make sure that our families are focusing on what they can control. Ensure safety and stability for family members as best as we can, to protect important documents and assets, to establish support networks and communication in case of an emergency, and to keep everything organized in one place, making it easy to access when needed. So I know that in conversations that I've had with families, I'm encouraging them to like create a binder with all of this information in one place. Um, and also maybe even like making sure that that binder's copies, and maybe keeping um, the real copies, like maybe in a safe, or like a fireproof safe, right? Um, it's important to keep copies of things. So beginning your emergency plan, and it'll, in a few slides, I do have a form that walks you through all of this, right? So it's like a checkoff form, like, do you have this? Do you have this? If this pertains to you, do you have this in order, right? And that's all accessible on the resource guide that I shared with you. And I will put that in the chat again one more time, just to make sure everyone has it, right? So identify who will be responsible for your children and or assets, and make sure that you're having a meeting to discuss your decisions, right? And I know for some cultures, especially Latinos, knowing I'm Mexicana and knowing that having like these real conversations are hard, right? But it's really important to like start having these conversations. For anyone with school-aged children, it's really important to make sure that your emergency contact information at the school is up to date, especially with your school and the doctor. Um, if your children are US citizens, it's really important. We're strongly recommending that people go and get their child's passport, right? And if they qualify with a dual citizenship, to also get that, again, if it's possible. Gather all important documents and store them in a safe place. Make sure that your emergency contact has access to them and start saving a little bit of money. We know this is hard, but ensure your bank account is linked to a debit card that can be used for withdrawals in another country. So making sure that your bank's accounts are accessible online. Remember that your money is your money no matter where you are, right? So just keep that in mind and determine ultimately what is the goal for your safety plan, right? So I know it's really hard to think about. So like if worst case scenario happens and one of your family members gets deported, what is the end goal? Unification, having your children stay in the United States while and have someone else raising them. Again, these are really hard decisions and choices and things you have to figure out, but it's something to think about. Um, so first things first, identify and discuss. So the person in charge of your children and assets does not have to be the same person. So one person could have your children, one person could be in charge of your assets. Have a conversation with the person you've chosen to handle these and make sure that they're like on board, right? Have a conversation with your children about who will be responsible for taking care of them if something were to happen to you. And short-term guardianship could be an option. And we will go into short-term guardianship in a little bit. So this is the emergency family plan that I have on the website. It's just a guide, right? It's a guide to like check mark like what you should have in order, what you shouldn't have in order. It's just something to help you organize your thoughts and what you should be looking for in case you're like, oh man, I didn't even think about I should have medical information or something like that, right? So it's just a little guide to make sure that we're kind of making sure we're being thorough. And that's the other page of the form. So emergency contact. So making sure that your emergency contact at your school is up to date. And that's really the extent of what the school needs to know about your status, right? Which has nothing to do with your status. So making sure that your emergency contact is up to date with your school, making sure that the right number is there, the right person's there, things like that. And yes, all of these forms, everything that I'm showing you is all on the website. Okay. Um, and then develop and keep a list of emergency contacts, including your attorney, your consulate. And again, that emergency form has a space for all of that to kind of keep everything in one space. Okay. So considerations for your emergency contact. The emergency contact should be a person you trust and be ready to do the following. So gather your important documents, notify your family members and pick up your child from school, contact an immigration attorney, and submit documents for your defense. Maybe even notifying your employer if that's something you wish to do, and take care of your pets and your home necessities during your absence, right? Um, I know I think sometimes people are like pets are like the last thing you should be worried about, but also we need to be thinking about our pets, right? When I saw that, I was like, I wasn't even thinking about people's pets, but you know, it's just something to think about. And then we talked about this, right? Apply for your child's US citizenship and dual passport if possible. Um, for children who may also be undocumented, um, or immigrant children, I should say, it's really important that you seek a legal consultation to explore their options. Because just because you're detained and deported does not necessarily mean that your child will. Again, everybody's situation is different. So if your child is not a US citizen, I would recommend that you seek a legal consultation from a trusted attorney. And then gather your documents. We suggest the binder. Make sure your emergency contact has access to your documents and make sure you have a written plan to make sure your family's aware of it. Um, and also, like if your child has a specific routine, like making sure that emergency contact knows that. Um, I think, in your absence, it could be extremely chaotic, but children like routine and tend to thrive on routine. So if you could keep that routine as close to normal as possible, it could really help that transition. Okay. If unification is the goal, um, even if, and I'll say this with recommendations, if unification is the goal, we still recommend that short-term guardianship until like for that interim until that reunification happens. Um, and again, that reminder, like notaries are not lawyers and are free at most libraries, right? So you don't always have to pay a notary. There's a lot of free notaries out there. Maybe even check with your town, like your town hall. Like maybe a lot of government employers are also notaries. And then travel arrangements for unification, right? A travel letter signed by both parents authorizing the guardian to travel with a minor child is really important. The letter should include child information, accompanying adult information, information about where the children or child are authorized to travel to, the travel timeline, and any other specifics that are pertinent to the guardian caregiver. And make sure to include a parent or guardian's signature and ensure the letter is notarized. So that letter should be notarized if it's for travel. Yes, yes. Thank you for noting that. So staff at elected officials' offices are also notaries. Yeah. Yeah, notaries don't you don't have to pay for them. Um, I always say if it's free, it's for me. Like I hate to pay for things that are available for free, right? Okay. So again, this checklist, important documents to kind of gather and keep in mind, right? And this is all on that paper on that emergency guide. Next. And then here's just a list of some information and documents that an attorney might ask for. There might be others, but this is pretty much like normal, right? In financial arrangements. So keep money in the bank account. Since you may not necessarily have access to cash, and make sure that bank account is again linked to a debit card that can be used outside the United States. Don't panic and close your bank account because you're panicking, right? Make sure that you have online banking access. And if you wish, add a trusted person to a joint bank account or assign them power of attorney. So guardianship is for like people and humans, and power of attorney is for stuff. Okay. Um, and you will probably have to use a power of attorney, a lawyer to do power of attorney. I have not heard or seen anybody being able to do that without going through a lawyer. And deportation or arrest does not remove your financial rights to your assets. Like we said before, your money is your money no matter what. Your house, car, bank accounts, and other assets cannot be taken away because of your immigration status. You have the right to receive your outstanding salary regardless of your immigration status. So if you are detained and you were owed a paycheck for like 2 weeks of work, again, your money is your money no matter what. You have the right to have that. And create a plan and an inventory of your assets. So, meeting with an immigration attorney, get a consultation with an attorney about your situation. It's really recommended. I've even talked to an immigration attorney who said that, like, if you consulted with an immigration attorney, like, let's say 10 years ago, right? And they told you, like, oh, you have to wait because right now is not a good time for you to apply for citizenship or whatever the case was, right? That the laws are constantly changing. And then that situation could have changed from like then until now. So, if you're interested in having applying for citizenship and having that status changed to to make sure that you were consulting with an immigration attorney. And again, unfortunately, if the attorney is not pro bono, like there's no, it does have to come out of pocket. So make sure that the attorney that you're seeking out is an actual attorney, and has their license. Again, don't rely on those previous consultations from years past. Laws change so quickly. Only get legal advice from a licensed attorney or paralegal. Around here, there's a lot of free like legal services and things like that. Like if you're from here, Basso has a paralegal on staff. And so there's a lot of orgs that have like that offer like legal consultations or, guidance from a paralegal or licensed lawyer. Yes. And Dana is adding a lot of resources. So thank you, Dana. Okay, so we're going to talk about guardianship. Here's the good news and the bad news. The good news is the guardianship is gonna vary from state to state. So we're not gonna spend a ton of time on here because there are so many people not from Illinois. So you're really gonna have to go to your state and check to see what the laws are regarding guardianship, okay? Here in Illinois, there are different types of guardianship. Um, there is, and the one that we're really going to talk about is that short-term guardianship. And I'll tell you why. Because the other types of guardianship, you have to go through court. You should probably have a lawyer, and it's more long-term, right? And then if you want it to end, you have to go back to court to have that terminated. Okay? So here in Illinois, we have the option of a short-term guardianship. Here are the advantages. There's no court, no notaries. It can last up to 365 days, but you could also renew it. And then you could also have it go into effect at a specific time or event, right? So you could put on there, you could stipulate that, like in the case of an emergency or in the case of I get detained or deported, right? A lot of families having nothing to do with immigration will put these in place if mom and dad are like traveling together without the children, right? So you could have this in effect as a just in case, right? This is in case of an emergency. It could also be terminated at any time by any parent, right? So both parents have to be on board, and if one parent chooses to revoke it, it's done, right? The parent's right does like a parent's right does not like this does not supersede a parent's right. Okay. Disadvantages. It is only specific to Illinois and it's not accepted everywhere, right? So say a student wants to maybe the short-term guardian wants to move to Wisconsin. I don't think that's possible. Like they're gonna have to seek a lawyer and consultation to see what that looks like and what has to happen in case you want to move out of state with your child with that child. Um, the law states that short-term guardianship should be treated as if it were court-ordered guardianship, and everyone, including medical and educational providers, should honor the short-term guardianship. Okay? But only here in the state of Illinois and only with state things. Like a short-term guardianship cannot get that child's passport because that's federal. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. So a lot of it is like with school and medical things, okay? Like making medical, not advice, making medical decisions, okay? And it's not permanent. If one parent signs and the other parent could revoke it, okay? Okay. So someone is saying that informal guardianship is what it's called in New York as long as the parent has that letter notarized. Yeah, every state is going to be different. Again, here in Illinois, a notarized, it doesn't have to be notarized. Okay. Um, in that earlier I was saying that we kind of go back to this, but right now around here there's some like notary group that is spreading this other like child minor power of attorney letter. Um, and it's not the right letter, it's not the right form. And again, you don't need a notary to do it here in Illinois. Okay. And we kind of went over this. So the guardian must comply with legal requirements, be someone the parents know and trust, be trustworthy, have resources to care for the children. Um, the guardian should also be over the age of 18. So if you have a child like a sibling who's 18 years or older, they could become the younger children's short-term guardian. Um, that person also shouldn't have like a record that's like involving children or violence. It does not need to be notarized. Short-term guardians cannot get passports. And again, seek legal advice if you have any questions, okay? Especially if there's like a custodial issue, like maybe the mom is estranged from the dad or vice versa. Um, and short-term guardianship can be appointed anytime, any place, right? So this actually could be done even after someone is detained and deported, okay? But it's free, it's easy, so why not? Okay. And then I have copies of the form on my guidance sheet. I have copies of the form here. It's really important to note that this is for minors under the age of 18. You have to fill out the English form. So use the Spanish form as a guide so people understand what they're signing. Um, but the English form needs to be filled out, and you need a form for each child. So you can't put all the children on one form. It is for one for each child. Okay. And then this is the lovely lawyer who has guided me and trained me on all of the short-term guardianship. She's fantastic. And her contact is here if you are in the state of Illinois and need support. Also, just a shout out to the Chicago Volunteer Legal Services. They are amazing and they do everything. So if you need an attorney for something, I would strongly recommend them and they're free. Okay. So just a little another reminder, exercise and know your rights, right? Identify who will take care of your children and update your emergency contact information at your child's school and with their doctor and any of like their little side things that they do. So if they're in dance, if they're in soccer, all of those emergency contact forms need to be updated. Okay. Memorize important numbers. I cannot like recommend that enough. I know that like I only know like two numbers off the top of my head because my phone has everything, right? So it's make sure that we're memorizing important phone numbers, gather important documents, keep them in a safe place, make sure your emergency contact is aware of it, and get a legal consultation, right? Um, I'm not a lawyer, so like this is all um information, but if there's like specific legal questions you have, seek legal consultation, seek legal advice. Okay, so we're going to talk about like supportive talking points, mental health. I think we're good on time. We have 30 minutes. So I think we're gonna do this. We're gonna make it through. I'll take a stop here, take a deep breath for water, see if how everybody's doing, if there's any other questions that I haven't answered about what we've talked about so far.
And there is a Q&A chat, so if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A.
Okay. I've only
Okay.
been looking at the chat.
What's up? We have one. I
I
think
already
you answered
dropped
this
that.
one. Yeah, I
Hmm.
think you answered
Okay.
this one.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm
I'm
only
glad she asked that. I was going to ask that same thing because I'd heard the rumbling about them being in the schools, which is super scary.
it is. And again, like I cannot emphasize enough, like that is a like school districts run like each school district is their own like governing, I don't know
Yeah.
how to explain it, but like, there's every school district runs differently, right? So you're gonna have to
Mhm.
consult your school's protocols and what that looks like.
Yeah.
Um, oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so going into the mental health, right? Because what is this doing to us mentally and doing to our kids, our community? Um, For immigrant children, fear of being forcibly separated from family through deportation is clearly traumatic and threatening, especially due to many immigrant populations' emphasis on like family, right? Like I know in the Latino community, like family is everything, right? And the truth is, many have risked their lives to come here. Oft, a lot of them have escaped traumatic events and life-threatening events in their home countries that propelled them to come here and seek refuge. And so, they went through a traumatic event to get here, and now that their new home is under threat. And so, just like what is that doing to us? The threat of separation from family or the return to a life-threatening circumstances generates a sense of hopelessness and helplessness. Um, like I'll tell you guys a little side story. I got a phone call from a school district last year. They had a family who was like new to the country, and this was in a kindergarten class. The little girl did not speak any English. And she was like in class, like trying to like make friends, but clearly not struggling socially. And she was sharing with her peers about how her mom taught her that her teeth, that her mouth was a weapon, and that if a bad guy was like approaching her, that she was gonna bite them. I mean, and she was sharing this with her peers, I think, as a way to like connect, but like scared off her peers. And I got a phone call like from the school saying like, what do we do? And I was like, well, clearly that child has been through some trauma, right? And like she's trying to connect, clearly not in the right way, because a lot of her social skills are lacking because they were traveling here. I mean, it took them, I think, a year and a half or 2 years, I remember from what I remember from the family to get here. So those vital years of like learning how to socialize and make friends were kind of lost, right? And here she is. I mean, she scared the crap out of her teacher and it's a neighborhood that they don't have a lot of it's a very English speaking neighborhood, and, they were like, what do we do? And I was like, she needs some therapy and maybe she needs some social work and maybe someone to sit down and like teach her how to make friends and not like tell this like awful, scary story to her classmates in order to find connection. But like you have what, a 4 or 5 year old being told to use their mouth as a weapon? Like, what does that do to you? What does that do to you as you grow, and how do you process that, right? Um, and that uncertainty for like what's going to happen in your future is traumatizing and distressing. So these fears increase a sense of isolation and hopelessness for youth and families. Okay. And the heightened level of distress may put people at risk for even more severe mental health concerns. Um, so like those who are particularly vulnerable are recipients of DACA, because DACA is still up in the air, right? Like, what are all these people who are on DACA gonna do? We're encouraging them to renew if they have it, but what about those who haven't applied for it? Those whose family members also may be undocumented and experiencing the same distress and may not be able to obtain adequate support. Visible minorities due to skin color, style of dress. We know that that ICE is essentially racially profiling a lot, right? They're picking up people who may already be citizens or have their green card, and they're asking questions later, right? So there are a lot of people who look minorities and are out there scared. I have a friend who is a naturalized citizen who like who has ICE has been very present here in Chicago, and he will like literally drive the other way. He was at a restaurant having lunch, and ICE officers walked into the restaurant to get lunch, and he like freaked out and left. And again, he's a naturalized citizen. He has his passport, he has his papers. He's a citizen, and it's still like it's causing stress onto everybody, right? Gender nonconforming youth. So like, you know, kids who are already in this category, in this like subcategory of individuals, especially gender nonconforming youth who are also Latino or also minorities, right? They're just at a heightened level of stress, especially with it like with LGBTQ individuals being attacked, transgendered youth are being attacked, right? And then those with pre-existing risk factors for suicidal behavior, right? Those who already had anxiety and depression before all of this was happening, right? Prior suicide attempts, non-suicidal self-injurious behaviors, those who are using substances, aggressive behavior, and those who are socially withdrawn, right? These are all individuals who we really need to make sure we're uh, we're keeping an eye on them, right? And supporting them and encouraging them to get help. Okay. And how is this impacting our youth, right? I know in a later slide we talk about ACEs, but like for those, I'm going to jump to that slide because let's talk about ACEs first, right? So ACEs is an adverse childhood experience. Okay. Um, there are a certain thing, like certain things that happen to children. I'm going to explain what ACEs is, right? In the most basic way I could explain it without going into like the science and everything, right? So basically, children who've experienced trauma have an increased um, have an increased probability of having issues as adults, right? So if you have four or more ACEs, meaning like four or more traumatic things that have happened to you as a child, you're three times like more likely to have levels of lung disease or adult smoking, 11 times the level of intravenous drug abuse, 14 times more are likely to attempt suicide, right? Four times likely to have begun intercourse by the age of 15. Um, so your lifespan decreases because of your trauma, right? What trauma does to our bodies is kind of like that, like it's what you don't see, but it really has an impact on your social, emotional, and cognitive abilities, your health. So like so what ACEs does to us, right? What these traumas do to us, right? So when we go back to thinking about children, right? And what is this having, like, how is this impact on children? Oh, I went too far. Hold on, wait, no. My screen is moving. Give me a second. What's happening? Okay. So the impact on young children, right? Fear and anxiety. Like those who are feeling fear and anxiety at a higher rate, their brains are not developing appropriately. Okay. And we've seen around here that children as young as 3 are fearing that their parents will be taken away. So like preschoolers are scared to go to school because they're afraid that if they go to school, when they come home, mom or dad will not be there, right? Again, when we're feeling that sense of fear and anxiety, our brains are are at this heightened level and it does not allow you to like to learn, to grow, like right, it affects the other parts of your brain. Okay. Reduced access to social services, right? A lot of parents are We have a lot of families that are missing important and vital appointments. They're declining services. I don't run. Our organization runs a food pantry here, and we saw like when immigration was first prevalent here, we saw a dip in families coming out to get food, and we know that they need food, right? They're coming here regularly because they need food, and they're declining to come out because they're afraid to come out, right? Missing their appointments, things like that, right? Stress on parents and educators. So parents being the primary support of their children are facing severe stress, right? I met with a family the other day and the brave face that they were putting on for their kids, was great. But when they were just with us, like they're worried, they're stressed. And again, being stressed and having that anxiety, it also interferes with our physical health, right? Blood pressure, things like that. Okay. Also, educators are being overwhelmed, right? How could you not? If you care about your kids and you care about the students that you're teaching and you're seeing them experience all of this stress and anxiety and fear, it's going to take a toll on you, right? Um, and then what do those long-term negative effects do? Stress, anxiety, and instability can harm brain development, impacts on your memory, your learning, and your emotional regulation, right? And all of that affects everything. Um, Here's a little sample of that trauma wheel. I won't go into this too much just for sake of time, but it's trauma has so much effect on us, right? It'll affect sleep. I've also heard of a lot of children like kind of regressing behavior. So maybe like starting to bedwet again or things like that, right? Maybe it's affecting their eating habits. So you could see students or kids starting to maybe binge eat to like eat their feelings or stop eating, right? Um, it just what trauma does to us in the body is all over the place and everyone, handles it differently. And Dana is just on it with putting up resources. Thank you, Dana. We already went through this. Okay. So how can we support youth and families, right? And um I know that when I'm talking with adults who work with kids, it's really like, we kind of have to come just to this realization. And it's not a happy realization, but like we could only control what we can control. Um, and supporting our families is the best of our ability, but know that there's so much out there that could happen. So it's important to model and discuss positive coping strategies, right? Promote safety, identify safe spaces, encourage our families to do those know your rights trainings. I always tell our families, like, you should start there. You should do a know your rights training. And then after that, create your emergency plan. Um, Identify and connect with social support, right? So finding that community, churches, places of worship, school groups if they're out there, community organizations. Even if maybe you don't have them in your backyard like we do over here, but there's places online, right? Like come join us in Chicago online, right? There's community out there. Find it because isolation is not good, right? Make sure that you're listening to concerns and reassure that you're part of their support system. Sometimes just a listening ear is all that you could do, but that could be so much, right? That could have such a high, important impact on a family or individual. And then monitor for signs of distress and self-harm, right? Like, so those warning signs, withdrawal from family or friends, dramatic mood changes. And I know that like teens already have dramatic mood changes, but like it's different, right? When it's mental health related. Talking, thinking, writing about death or self-harm, that's a big, big sign. Having them talk about feelings of hopelessness or helplessness, unusual, reckless behavior, um, and then also giving away prized possessions. That's a tall tale sign that someone might be looking to hurt themselves, right? And intervene and seek additional resources when appropriate. And I will share the 988 is a number nationally that you could call if you need support and if someone is feeling suicidal, right? Or want to hurt themselves. And then sharing coping strategies, right? Keeping family and school routines as much as you can. Practice relaxation, talking and spending time with families, friends, or faith communities just something to distract you, right? Using humor, scheduling pleasant activities, getting involved in your community, right? Exercising, writing in a journal, being creative or artistic, avoiding substance use and isolation, and limiting media use to avoid repeti re repetitious images, repetitive images. Oh my God, I am so sorry. I swear, I am intelligent. Um, and messages that remind them of bad events, right? And like what is social media doing to you, right? This like idea of shame, and I see this in a lot of our like teenagers. So they're showing like signs of social anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, negative body image, addiction. And this is just like a normal teenager not dealing with immigration and everything scary in the world, right? Like this is what social media is doing to our kids. Okay. And then that kind of idea of the power of separation, right? Just reminding yourself of what you could control and what you can't control. So, like, you can control your reactions, your emotions, your boundaries, your effort, who you engage with, like who's in your circle. That's so important. And your perspective, right? And what you can't control is like other people's actions and feelings, the past, external circumstances in the future, right? So, just kind of keeping that in mind. Um, and then we'll just skip that. Ways to combat guilt and shame, right? Practice self-care, show yourself some compassion, stop blaming yourself, find a support network, talk to a caring friend, or journal your feelings. Okay. And then how should we be talking about immigration, right? And I'll say this, I know that some schools have told teachers directly, like, don't talk about it. Don't say anything, don't talk about it, don't even acknowledge it, right? And I don't know how you care about your students, especially if you have children who are immigrants and you don't do that. Um, so I'll say this, you do what you can and what you're allowed to do, right? But I think it's really important when you're talking to kids in general that you build empathy, right? So empathy is really the key. You want to be welcoming to everyone, right? I think it's really important that you don't repeat negative myths or stereotypes, even if you think that you're saying them to prove a point, like stick to using truths and facts, right? I think that's really important. I thought this was a really interesting point too, to be truthful and critical about our complex history. And I know at a time where um our history is being erased essentially, right? Like I've heard of things like people like deleting things from museums and things like that. I think it's really important to like be honest about our history, right? We can't grow if we don't know what we're growing from, right? And I think it's also important to support all of our students, right? Um, Not just students who are immigrants, but everyone in the classroom, right? Everyone belongs here. Um, And then again, I would contact, I would make sure if you work in a school that make sure like that you're following your school's policy, right? I would never want you to put yourself in danger where you're losing your job because that's your livelihood. And then these are just samples of signs you could put in your classroom. You belong here. I love butterflies, and I will tell you a little story about butterflies at the end. Um, but other things to keep in mind, it's okay not to have all the answers. Um, please don't spread misinformation. It's really important that you're getting information from like reputable sources, right? Maybe do research with your students, right? Maybe say, hey, I don't know. And I think that's very humanizing to say you don't know, right? It makes you human. But say, hey, let's look it up together, right? Um, Everything on social media may not be true, right? And help create a sense of community for your students and their families, right? Um, you could be their safe adult. And the one thing to that ACEs survey, the one thing that the ACEs thing, like you can offset and you could change the trajectory of a student's life by being that trusting adult. Like you could offset all of that trauma by showing them how to cope, by being that trusting adult, by being that person that they could come to, right? So that's really, really important. Um, and then again, 988, Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. This is a national thing. Please make sure that you are sharing this out if you can. Okay. And then one more thing before we finish, I just want to talk about like what we could tell our parents to do and how we could recommend that they have family meetings. And again, Latinos do not like to talk about things, right? We like to stuff our feelings, pretend everything's okay. Don't share your business with other people, right? And I know like around here, a lot of kids don't find out that their families or that themselves are even undocumented until they're about 16 or 17 when they want to get a job or when they want to get a driver's license or when they're starting to think about college, right? So this could be a really difficult conversation to have. But we want to encourage our families to get educated on the immigration issues first and foremost. Have them attend a Know Your Rights training again, right? Find an organization or community group to help facilitate a conversation if they need help. Um, have a family meeting, encourage a regular space and time where your family is coming together and talking about what's happening in the country or around you in your neighborhood. Acknowledge all the feelings that are happening. Allow space for the emotions that may come with learning about a family member's documentation status, right? They might be angry, they might be sad, they might be scared, right? Regularly address concerns and identify what supports children or family members may need. Be mindful that youth process information in different ways. and address concerns you may see. A lot of times they might act out, right? All behavior is a form of communication. Okay. And then develop and share that family plan. What do you do in case of an emergency? And go over it regularly and ensure that everybody knows what to do and utilize those support systems. Okay. We remember that we are all preparing for the worst, but hoping for the best. And then butterflies, right? I'm wearing butterflies today. Butterflies, especially the monarch butterfly, are a symbol of immigration because they migrate long distances, crossing borders in search of safer habitats. Their migration parallels the journeys of human migrants who are migrating also for survival. Okay. And finally, how are we feeling? There was so much information. Um, I hope that this gave you some energy and some ideas of what you could take back to your families and how to support your families. This was not meant to make you depressed or make you feel worse than maybe you came in feeling. But because it is such a heavy topic, it is such a heavy thing to think about what people are going through, right? Be mindful that you know that that trauma, you know, you could if your community is experiencing trauma or if people are experiencing trauma around you, like take care of yourself, right? Vicarious trauma is a real thing. So make sure that you all are taking some time for self-care, some reflection. Um, you know, this is really heavy, right? Um, so just make sure that you're taking care of yourself. So for power of attorney, it could be expensive. I would seek out an organization that does legal consultation for free, right? Maybe even, and I don't, and I haven't heard much that banks could support, but it's something to think about. Okay. Um, but yeah, power of attorney for things. And that is not a form that you could just do, you know, with a notary or something. You do need to have a lawyer.
Mhm.
Yeah, unfortunately. Which is weird. I'll say this, like kind of makes me angry that like kids is easy, but the stuff is hard and expensive, right? Like, what are we
Mhm.
valuing? What are we putting value on, right? I don't
Yeah.
know. But then at the same time, I'm like, well, thank goodness that's easy. You know, I don't know. I have mixed emotions about that.
Yeah.
And there's my contact information. There it is. I will put that resource guide again in the chat. Um, I run a whole website on resources, but then I have this specific resource guide. Um, there's my email and my phone number. Oh, can you put the link to the poll again? Yeah, if everyone can make sure that they're
Yeah. Lori, can you drop the link for us? Um, Guys, I just want to say that both times Maria-Elena has graciously just volunteered her time to put this together and to share this with us. And I'm so grateful. It is such a heavy topic, but so needed. And she didn't do it once, but she did it twice. And we're just grateful. Thank you. This was so many things that had my eyes were like, whoa, like what? Like, oh my gosh. Like I haven't thought about it, but you make me, after each one of these, you make me think about reaching out to my friends who are, to my, Hispanic, Latino friends to just check on them again. Because I remember checking with some of them earlier on, and then they were just like, oh, well, we're fine because they're only getting the bad people. And then after hearing these conversations and just watching news, I'm like, oh, I need to do a better like check to see if things have changed because this was pretty heavy. Um, but useful. So thank you, Maria Elena. Again, thank you from the bottom of Beach Young Family's hearts. Lori,
my
can you put up um the slides? And then the poll is up. Please take a moment to complete the poll for us. We're putting these back, polls, we're putting them back on the webinars. For those of you guys who don't know, upcoming Taster Cafes, this is the plan for them. If you scan the QR code, you can see all the new ones that's coming up that's being held by or hosted by our National Parent Cafe leadership team. Please drop in and check them out. We'd love to see you in the space. Next one. This is our Bichon Family Shop. All of our decks are there. Some great gifts. Christmas is coming up. Yes, you did the Parent Cafe training, Crawford. Yes. Yes, so all of your additional decks, Crawford, you can find on our shop, and some great games and protective factor stuff. So some great stuff on the website. Scan the QR code to get there. Next, Lori. And then if you benefited from or value what we do, please feel free. We love donations. These donations go to help pay for not only the webinars, but also for our National Parent Cafe leadership team as they host free cafes for the community, which are very needed and extremely helpful. And so that we don't have a budget for parent engagement. So whatever you donate goes to help us to do that. Okay. Thanks again, everybody, for being here. Thank you again, Maria-Elena. Thank you for all you guys who stayed until for the full 30 minutes afterwards. We appreciate you. Shout out to Dana for all of her great resources and Lori for the PowerPoint. And again, Maria-Elena, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing everybody. October 28th is our next webinar, and that is Grooming 101, protecting what matters, keeping our children safe, um, keeping our children safe from the dangers of predators. Okay. So you want to mark your calendar for that October 28th from 12 to 1.